I did, and I was referring particularly to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, and you also said Ms. Hutchinson, regarding this particular claim, was a second or even third-hand witness. We asked you, if you were a defense attorney, how would you handle cross-examining her if she was on the witness stand? And you said, if I were a defense attorney and Ms. Hutchinson were a witness, the first thing I would do was seek to preclude her testimony because it was hearsay. You remember saying all that?
Yeah.
This may look like a routine exchange between a lawmaker and a former prosecutor, but it's actually a stress test for how political investigations handle evidence. What's really being tested here is whether legal standards bend when narratives take priority over verification. This raises broader questions about accountability, due process, and how institutions justify their power. In this video, we'll break down how evidentiary shortcuts can reshape public perception, and what that means for the integrity of democratic oversight.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Smith, is Cassidy Hutchinson a liar? She was their star witness. January 6th committee, their star witness in one of those staged and choreographed hearings they paid the former president of ABC News to put together. She was, in fact, the only witness at this special primetime hearing, Tuesday, June 28th, 2022, 8 o'clock in the evening, and she told some stories. I mean, these were some stories. She talked about the president lunged across the back seat, grabbed the steering wheel, tried to drive the car to the Capitol. And I just want to know, you think she was lying?
Chairman Jordan, my assessment of that particular issue is that with respect to the testimony about the president lunging towards the driver, my recollection of her testimony about that is that it was secondhand. She said she'd heard that from somebody.
You familiar with the name Tony Ornato?
I'm sorry?
You familiar with the name Tony Ornato?
Yes.
White House Deputy Chief of Operations, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, right? You remember what he said about it?
As I sit here right now, I do not.
Yeah, he said it didn't happen. How about Bobby Engel? You familiar with that name?
Yes, I am.
Secret Service agent who was actually in the car that day. You know what he said? He said it didn't happen. And they both said the first time they ever heard this story was when Ms. Hutchinson testified in the primetime hearing as their star witness of the January 6th committee. By the way, did you ever confirm her testimony about this particular incident?
We conducted, as I said before, our own independent investigation of all aspects of the case that we thought was relevant. We, attorneys from my office.
Did you ever confirm it? That's a simple question.
Well, we interviewed, or I should say attorneys in my office before.
Did you ever confirm the president leaping across the seat, grabbing the steering wheel, this whole concoction she brought up in the January 6th hearing? Did you ever confirm that?
Right. We interviewed another firsthand witness who was in the car who did not confirm that had happened, but also
in your deposition to the committee last month, Mr. Smith, you said this: my recollection with Ms. Hutchinson was a number of the things that she gave evidence on were secondhand hearsay. You remember making that statement to us last month in the deposition?
I did, and I was referring particularly to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, and you also said Ms. Hutchinson, regarding this particular claim, was a second or even third-hand witness. We asked you, if you were a defense attorney, how would you handle cross-examining her if she was on the witness stand? And you said, if I were a defense attorney and Ms. Hutchinson were a witness, the first thing I would do was seek to preclude her testimony because it was hearsay. You remember saying all that?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
That's correct, right? Were you going to put her on the witness stand if you ever got to trial?
We had not made final determinations as to who we were going to call as a witness. We had a large.
You were still considering her?
We had a large choice of witnesses in this case.
Are you familiar with what Washington Post reporters Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis said in their book? They did this book, 300-some pages book on chronicling the whole investigation at the Justice Department. And here's what they said on page 310. They said Jack Smith had wondered whether some of Hutchinson's claims might be relied upon at trial. Still, at one point, Smith told the elections team he wasn't ready to give up on Hutchinson's account. Ultimately, however, Trump administration officials uniformly, fiercely disputed her accounts under oath. Prosecutors on your team told Smith they wouldn't want to use Hutchinson as a witness in court, and Smith agreed. Are Carol Leonnig and Aaron Davis, who wrote this, are they lying?
My recollection is that I certainly had not made any final determinations about who we were going to call.
And that's the point. That is the point. The fact that they used her in a primetime hearing, and you won't rule out using her, or didn't rule out using her, putting her on the witness stand, when everybody knows she wasn't telling the truth, that says it all. That's the degree the left and Democrats were willing to go to get President Trump, putting on the witness stand someone everybody knows is making it up. Everybody knows that. And you were willing to do it. By the way, you know how many times Cassidy Hutchinson was mentioned in their report, the January 6th report? Any idea, Mr. Smith?
I do not.
185 times. Someone that the whole country knows wasn't telling the truth, and you were still considering putting her on the witness stand because you had to get President Trump. And everybody can see that. We better take a...
What you just witnessed was not a casual exchange. It was a collision between accusation and accountability, unfolding in real time under the lights of a congressional hearing room. When Chairman Jim Jordan looked directly at Jack Smith and asked whether the January 6th committee's star witness had told the truth, the room shifted. Because this was no longer about a single claim. It was about whether an entire narrative presented to the American public in prime time could withstand even the most basic scrutiny. Cassidy Hutchinson had been elevated as a central figure in a nationally televised hearing, her testimony framed as definitive, dramatic, and damning. The story was cinematic, designed to linger in the public imagination. But under questioning, Jack Smith acknowledged what had long been buried beneath headlines and repetition. The most sensational claim was secondhand, not observed, not verified, heard from someone else. And when those who were actually present were asked, they said it never happened. This moment exposes something far larger than a disagreement over testimony. It reveals how power operates when outcomes matter more than process, when spectacle overtakes verification, when the urgency to secure a political result eclipses the obligation to uphold standards that once defined justice in this country. Jordan's questioning was relentless, not because it was personal, but because it was precise. Names were cited, depositions recalled. Statements compared against one another. And slowly, methodically, the image of certainty began to fracture. Smith himself had previously described Hutchinson's account as secondhand, even third-hand. He admitted that as a defense attorney, he would seek to block such testimony. Yet the committee placed it at the center of a nationally broadcast event, repeating it again and again, embedding it into an official report more than 100 times. That contradiction matters because the justice system is not supposed to operate on convenience. It is not supposed to select evidence based on how effectively it persuades an audience. The standard is supposed to be truth, tested and confirmed. And when that standard bends even once, the consequences ripple outward. What we saw was not merely a witness whose claims were disputed. It was an acknowledgement that investigators knew the weaknesses, understood the limits, and proceeded anyway. Not because the facts demanded it, but because the narrative required it. And that raises a deeply unsettling question about modern governance. When does the pursuit of accountability turn into the pursuit of a target? Jack Smith's hesitation was telling, not in anger or defiance, but in careful wording. He did not say the story was true. He did not say it was confirmed. He said decisions were still under consideration. That ambiguity placed beside the certainty projected to the public reveals a growing gap between what institutions say internally and what they present externally. This is where trust begins to erode. Not all at once, not with a single revelation. But through moments like this, when Americans realize that what was presented as fact may have been assumption, amplified through repetition and authority. And once that realization sets in, it does not remain confined to one case or one committee. It spreads to every future claim, every future hearing, every future appeal to credibility. The deeper issue on display is not partisan, it is structural. A system that rewards narrative dominance over evidentiary restraint risks, becoming performative rather than principled. And when justice becomes a performance, the audience is no longer the public. It is power itself. Jim Jordan's closing point cut to the heart of it, the willingness to place a disputed account at the center of a historic proceeding, while privately acknowledging its fragility speaks volumes. It tells us how far institutions may be willing to go when the stakes are high and the objective is singular. It tells us that the guardrails many Americans assumed were immovable may in fact be negotiable. This moment matters because it reminds us that democracy does not fail in one dramatic instant. It weakens incrementally through shortcuts justified as necessary, through standards lowered in the name of urgency, through silence where skepticism should have been loudest. And it is only when those shortcuts are exposed under questioning like this that the public is allowed to see the machinery behind the message. History will not judge this exchange by how sharp the questions sounded or how uncomfortable the answers were. It will judge it by what it revealed about the relationship between truth and power in this era. About whether institutions still fear being wrong or whether they fear only being unsuccessful. The responsibility now shifts to the viewer, to question narratives that arrive fully formed, to demand evidence that survives scrutiny, not applause, to remember that accountability without integrity is not justice, but theater. Because a system that asks the public to believe before it proves will eventually ask the public to obey without question. And that is a line no free society can afford to cross. If you believe these moments matter, if you believe accountability must apply to those who claim to enforce it, support our work, subscribe to Liberty Report USA,